Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. It's the image of you in a studio, not in this building, not in this house. This is a proper studio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're gonna have to walk me through this because it's jaw-dropping. So let me just describe it though. So you're standing dead center in the frame. You're holding up the edge of a piece of paper that's probably almost a meter wide by 3/4 of a meter long, or whatever it is. You're pulling it back, and it's a print. And this is the stone lithography?
Yes, yes.
And then in the print, the photo is fantastic because you could see the studio of the workspace. And what is the stone lithography you're etching into the lithography?
It's a big piece of limestone, and it's about originally it would have been 4 inches thick. It's probably thinner now because you actually draw right on the stone.
Yeah.
And you put it on what's called a graining sink, and then you actually, it's like sanding it right down, so it's absolutely flat. It's got to be as flat as the top of this table.
Yeah.
And if there is any indentations in it, when you're putting, it goes under pressure, you'll see a hollow, so it won't print. So this is the third of 4 colors that I'm doing on this particular print, which is about it's a young swan. I called it Signet. Mm-hmm. And when you end up doing this stone lithography, it's an old method. It was invented by a guy named Sennefelder about maybe 200 years ago. And
it's not actually that old.
Well, it's not that old, really.
But amazing. The details.
But it's a really difficult medium to work in. I worked at Malaspina Printmaker Studio. This is down on Granville Island. Mm-hmm. And after 20 years of pulling off these stone lithographies, which you can see behind me and all over my house, you have to bend over and use these heavy rollers. Right. And when you're drawing, you have to be up on a kind of a counter, and you can't sit and you bend over. Right. So my back has just gone, I couldn't do it anymore. Sure. So I had to kind of quit, and I'm doing different mediums right now. But this is so satisfying because when you work on that stone, you use a special greasy pencil. Yeah. And you draw on it just like you would draw on a piece of drawing paper, but it's greasy. And I do really, really detailed stuff. There's one piece that I did of some rocks with some cormorants on it. It took me 70 hours to draw.
Insanely detailed.
Yes. And then what you have to do is you have to give it, it's a kind of a chemical etch. It isn't like digging in. The stone is always level on the surface. Yeah. But the theory is that water and oil don't mix. Yeah. So that's why the lithographic crayons that I use to draw, and you've got to sharpen them all the time because they're quite soft, they go onto the stone. And when you end up doing your finished drawing, it's all ready to go. You have to do just this kind of a chemical etch that just more or less stabilizes the image on the stone. Yeah. And then you get it onto the printing press. There's 2 printing presses at Malaspina. This one is an electric one, and rather than having to crank it, you use it as an electrical thing. So you put your piece on there, and you take the whole image off, and then you end up rolling it up. You sponge it with water, and the water gets repelled by the oily, the kind of greasy surface that you've drawn with. And then when you're putting on the ink, like you put it on with a roller, and it adheres to only the image you've drawn, whereas the open part of the stone absorbs the water, and it won't print. And if you look at any of the posters, for instance, by Toulouse-Lautrec, same method. So that was what they use. And of course, anything this is before kind of the digital era came by. Right. All the kind of lithographs that you would see would be any magazine or anything like that. It was something called offset lithography. Yep. And of course it's called offset because you have a blanket that goes in between, which when you print here, everything comes out backwards. And if you do the offset, because there's an offset blanket, it goes through twice and it prints it on the right side. But I can remember I was doing one piece of Bowen Island. I'd gone to visit a friend, and he had a property there their family had owned for years, and I took some photographs. And I ended up starting an 8-color lithograph. Like each color that you print has to end up being printed on top.
Right. 8 layers.
In layers. So you can see the complexity and the registration that you've got to use. But anyway, I started this thing and I started printing it. And after 2 colors, I realized that what I usually do when I get an image, I take it in my computer and I flip it so it's backwards. Right. So then when you draw it, when you print it, it's the other way around, which is the right way. But
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I'm going to put a pause just because you've thrown a lot of words and ideas, and it's kind of funny, like the pace and the intensity and the energy is really, I'm with you 100%. I love it. And I'm just trying to think of somebody who's listening. First of all, you have to go online to look at this because the detail, the fine detail is just incredible. Like in terms of, because you have so much texture within that. So do you have to actually draw in? Do you have to illustrate the texture, or is that actually somehow within the medium?
Well, because you end up sanding it down, it's like you use gradually finer sand. It's a grit that you use, like a coarse grit, and then you rinse that off, and you use a medium grit, and then a very fine grit. But it leaves a little bit of a tooth on the top of the stone. Yeah. So when you draw, it's just like you're drawing on a textured piece of paper. And the things that the grain, it's only kind of on the surface So it's one of the most difficult things to explain whenever I've been maybe in an art fair.
Well, I think ultimately, I think it's a process. It's like if I were to explain the chemistry of black and white photographs,
indeed,
it can be quite complex. Yeah. But ultimately, it's also the result, and so like it just stops you in your tracks. So let's rewind the tape. I don't know how many years. A couple of years, let's say. Let's rewind the tape a couple of years where you started. Where you learned how to do this. So when did you learn how to do this? How did you start?
Well, I was a graphic designer all my life. I went to the Alberta College of Art, and I got my art degree, and then I moved up to Vancouver. Okay. And I ended up starting my own business, and I ran my own business for about maybe 30 years. Oh, okay. And it was very successful, but after a while, of course, it was kind of time to end up thinking about retiring. And I knew I wanted to end up doing something in fine art, and I never really liked painting. I'm such a precise person. Painting is much more of a fluid. Yes, indeed. So I started taking some courses out at UBC, and I discovered what was called plate lithography, which is not drawing on a stone, but you draw on it's a different. I'm not going to explain. No problem. But anyway, I decided I liked this, but I took a course at Malaspina, and it was an evening course. And over 6 weeks, I learned the process. And drawing on stone is just like drawing on paper, and I really love drawing. I like it compared to painting. So to me, I just thought that's exactly what I want to do, and I joined Malaspina. Amazing. And I was still working with clients, but as gradually I decided to kind of transition, and I was working pretty well full time, for the last maybe 5 years at the time that I was,
So the image again is of you at the studio, you're pulling up, and I love how tactile it is. Like you have this beautiful smile on your face. The light's nice. It's so bright, it's so fun. It's also the satisfaction, I know, of peeling back the sheet. And so what's the grain of this piece of paper? Like how thick is it? In terms of the
fairly thick.
Is it very textured or no?
Well, you can do any. I use it more or less kind of a smooth paper, but it's got to be soft so the ink will sink into it. If it's too hard, it will just lay on the surface. Because you have to end up, if you're doing multiple colors, you need to have it completely dry before you put the next thing on. And if you get just too many colors, there's only so many that you can do. But it's a very complex process.
And it's just, I've seen a lot of art in my life. I've seen a lot of images. And then when I saw this, I was floored. And I want to say like Elisabeth is in the house, but I'm at your house. So of course you're in the house. This is great. Next photo.
Yes.
Would you want to say something else?
No, I was just going to say Malaspina itself is still going on, and they're still doing lithography there. It's not as popular because it's one of the most difficult things, but they've had a whole renovation in the studio down on Granville Island. They just finished it, so they've just opened it up again. And it looks much better than that. That's kind of a messy looking.
Right. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting.